Have you heard we have a new Prime Minister in the UK? Out with Keir Starmer, who you may have heard of, and in with Andy Burnham, who you probably haven't heard of. That's unless you visited Manchester, the city in the northwest of the UK. Andy Burnham was Mayor of Manchester for more than 10 years, until just recently when it looked like Keir Starmer was on his way out. So Andy Burnham quickly became an MP, and then he could stand for the Labour Party leadership. So Mayor of Greater Manchester, that's Mayor Mayor, and it's just like Boris Johnson, and after him Sadiq Khan became Mayor of London. Of course, New York also has a mayor. And yes, Andy Burnham's Manchester is the same Manchester as Manchester United or Manchester City, and it's also the Manchester that the band Oasis come from too. So we haven't had an election, we haven't had a vote in the UK, but Andy Burnham has simply succeeded Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about him, but in this podcast episode, let's give a feel for what's happening in the UK. So we'll be covering some of the vocabulary that you need to talk about politics in any country. But I'll also give you a glimpse of who this new Prime Minister Andy Burnham is. What does he stand for? And what does this word Manchesterism actually mean? This is live English language, developing all the time. So let's reflect that in our podcasts while giving you interesting English language listening material to listen to. Let's answer that question about Manchesterism first. It's what Andy Burnham says he stands for politically, and he describes Manchesterism as the end of neo-liberalism. What is that, you may ask? It's a term worth explaining. Neo, N-E-O, means new, hyphen liberalism, L-I-B-E-R-A-L-I-S-M. And liberal, as an adjective, it means free, easygoing. Another expression we use, and sometimes that's political, laissez-faire, from the French, which means let it do, let the thing be. So neoliberalism is the belief that businesses and free markets, buying and selling of goods and services, should be as free as possible. Few government rules and restrictions. Neoliberalism also means that governments should sell off public utilities like water companies, train companies, bus companies, electricity companies, and they should be in private ownership, not run by the state. And neoliberalism also means that government stays out of the way of business. So it cuts rules and regulations and just lets the market get on with it. And the idea of neoliberalism is that the wealth, the money made, trickles down. The effect is supposed to be that the people who are less well off, who have less money, they benefit from the money trickling down. So for neoliberalism, you want a buoyant, a good economy, stability, and lots of jobs. The idea of neoliberalism is that if all of that works, there's less need for what we call in the UK the welfare state. That's W-E-L-F-A-R-E, state. And that refers to the system where the state, the government, ends up paying for lots of people to live, usually because they don't have jobs, and that happens when unemployment, lack of jobs, is high. So this neoliberalism has dominated British politics since the 1980s, since the days of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, if you've heard of her. But now Andy Burnham is saying enough of neoliberalism. Manchesterism is against neoliberalism. He calls Manchesterism business-friendly socialism That's Socialism. I quote here, he says, "It's a modern and functional response to the high inequality, low growth trap that we are in at the moment." What does he mean by high inequality? He means it's unequal. There's a big difference between the rich people and the poor people in our society. And we've got low growth. That means that our economy is not growing, not doing very well. Andy Burnham is also working against what he sees as over-centralisation. Our politics are all in Westminster, in London, and Whitehall in London is the seat of government. Andy Burnham wants to decentralise. He wants to spread power around the country, in other words. In a recent speech, Andy Burnham described Manchesterism as an approach that combines economic growth with social benefits, government funding, in other words. And Andy Burnham is hoping that his policies, his actions, will explicitly channel money from economic growth towards particular people, particular communities, the ones who need it. So Andy Burnham and his Manchesterism reject this idea of trickle-down politics, that a buoyant economy and neoliberalism benefits everybody, even the poor people. He doesn't believe that. And I think it's true, actually, that neoliberalism often doesn't benefit the people at the bottom, because the wealthy people at the top tend to pocket all the wealth, all the money. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That is what we see. It's also true in America and many other Western countries, I think. And Andy Burnham doesn't like Thatcherism. He argues that the cost of living crisis in the 2020s has its roots in Thatcherism, which is a style of thinking where every man and woman is for themselves. Everybody looks after themselves and their families. While I think there may be some truth in that, if you're talking about the cost of living crisis in the 2020s, I think that other things have affected that. What about the COVID pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine war, which made costs spiral in the UK, and some possible economic effects of Brexit? And the UK has also closed down its manufacturing base, so we don't actually make very much anymore. That's a whole different discussion. Anyway, while you could argue that Prime Minister Keir Starmer seemed to focus more on his image across the world, what people thought of him as a politician on the world stage, Andy Burnham so far is much more about what happens in the UK, so far at least. Politico is a politics and news focused service, that's Politico, and they point out that Manchesterism is also a code for not Westminsterism. It's an anti-London stance, perhaps. In our country, many people feel very frustrated with London-centred politics. And for Andy Burnham, wrapping yourself in the flag of a proud northern city is good branding. It's like he's saying, I'm not one of them, I'm one of you. I'm an ordinary person too. And if English isn't your first language, you may not be able to hear his strong northern accent, but it's a powerful part of his character. It speaks of working class roots and again is part of his image and his appeal. And this accent of Andy Burnham's, it contrasts sharply with the received pronunciation or RP of Keir Starmer, who is very much part of the establishment, very much middle class and London-centred. So even Andy Burnham's voice speaks to the poorer people in our society. So how has Andy Burnham become Prime Minister without even a vote in his own party, the Labour Party? Once it was clear that Keir Starmer had to go, there could have been a Labour leadership election. But nobody stood against Andy Burnham. Pretty much most Labour MPs appear to support him. They realised a change was needed at the very least. So Andy Burnham is very popular and well regarded and seen as successful in his role as Mayor of Greater Manchester. People liked what he did. So what did he do? Well, he re-established public control of buses, creating what's called the B network. Bright yellow buses, and the charge to go anywhere is no more than £2. He also set up the Good Growth Fund, which provided £1 billion for 3 projects in each of Greater Manchester's boroughs. That word borough, Borough, it's like the ending of lots of our town names. Farnborough, Scarborough, Loughborough. There's one to practice. So the B network is Manchester's publicly controlled bus system. I can see a problem with that £2 fare. If fuel prices keep rising because there are problems in the Middle East, how is £2 going to be affordable? And of course, you're always popular in an area when you spend lots of money. The Good Growth Fund had an investment pot of £1 billion, and this was spread across all 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester. So part of why Andy Burnham is so well liked in Manchester, he's associated with these projects and the spending of the money. And in his Manchesterism, he's also very much about what we call devolution. That's Devolution, the decentralisation of power. In the UK, we have devolved governments for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. That means they have their own governments with their own powers. And Andy Burnham wants to see more of this. He wants to push political power out to the regions, out to the cities, and out to local communities. So more people get to decide locally how government money is spent, especially on roads, schools, buses and transport. That's instead of someone who doesn't know the local area and probably doesn't care that much about it, sitting in London and making decisions for you. Another of his ideas is number 10 North. So you may be familiar with number 10 Downing Street in London, the home of the Prime Minister, number 11 Downing Street, home of the Chancellor, the person who looks after the money. Well, Andy Burnham is proposing number 10 North. That means part of government will move up to Manchester. It won't be in London anymore. And this northern branch of Downing Street will be overseen by Louise Haigh. There has been some healthy scepticism. You know I like that word scepticism, Scepticism. I often indulge in healthy scepticism myself, and it means just challenging and questioning those mainstream opinions. So the scepticism about Andy Burnham's government centres around money. How are all these wonderful ideas that he's promising going to be funded? How will they be financed? The BBC's economics editor, Faisal Islam, had a field day last week, raising questions over this. He thinks that the figures, the sums do not add up, and people's fear about Andy Burnham, additional taxes are just round the corner. Everything has to be paid for, doesn't it? It's tough being a British Prime Minister. Andy Burnham is only several days into the job, but I'm sure he's already finding that. It's probably a rather more difficult job than being Mayor of Greater Manchester. Only time will tell. Let's give him a chance and see how he does. Do let us know your thoughts and feelings, and if you would like some more podcasts on British politics.